this because it takes a lot of practice. We're going to change page a little and take a look at some of those biotic and abiotic interactions I was discussing a bit earlier. I'll start by focusing on biotic interactions, such as the ones that occur between species. So let's start with the one you're probably most familiar with, the one I gave an example for at the start of the lesson, which is predation. Predation is probably the most direct and impactful just from an immediate standpoint because it's happening so often. It involves the pursuit, capture, and killing of animals called prey. And they do that for the food source of another animal known as a predator. Think back to the lion and gazelle example I gave earlier. The lion predates the gazelle. In that case, the lion is the predator and the gazelle is the prey. This is, so as you might expect, when the density of prey in an ecosystem increases, it actually always, or most often than not, leads to a corresponding rise in the population of predators. And this is just simply because more prey means more food, which increases the carrying capacity for predators. This dynamic can also result in the reduction of prey population over time, as an increase in predators will decrease the prey population. And that in turn results in a predator decline because there's not enough food to support them all. And this is essentially the balance of, or the beauty of predation. It basically just keeps population numbers under control within a range. I won't spend too much more time on that since you're probably familiar with what predation is just from your general studies. Another one you might know is competition. Competition occurs when multiple species fight for limited resources, and this can include things like food, water, shelter, others for like offspring. And this competition is a really key factor in determining what's known as the carrying capacity for each species within an ecosystem, or the maximum number of organisms that can survive in an ecosystem indefinitely. So typically the stronger or more adaptable organism will outcompete the weaker ones, and this means that all that's left behind are the stronger organisms, which in turn ensures their long-term survival. While this does occur between species, the less competitive of the two can usually be completely eliminated. So if we have two species that occupy really similar roles within an ecosystem and they have the same diet, they eat the same animals, they are preyed on by the same animals, a lot of the time the weaker of the two will be eliminated by the process of competition. And this natural selection is really important for maintaining the balance of species within an ecosystem, but it can also reduce biodiversity if one species dominates too strongly. Going back again to cane toads, you probably know if you live in Queensland how they have completely eviscerated certain native species populations. So in that case, we are saying they are competing with other species, but not in a positive way. That's an example of one of the negative interactions that I was discussing earlier. We also have another type of species interaction, which is really sort of the opposite of competition, symbiosis. And symbiosis just really refers to long-term interactions between different species. The ones we've been discussing are sort of short-term relationships, but these ones exist over a longer period of time. There are a couple of sub-interactions that fall under symbiosis, and yes, you do need to know them. I'm going to quickly list them, but it is important that you're able to define each. So the first we have is mutualism. It's really just a type of symbiosis where both species benefit from the relationship. You can think examples like bees pollinating flowers while feeding on their nectar. Certain birds protect cows from flies by eating them. It's really just a relationship where both the species benefits. On the opposite side of that coin, we have parasitism, and this occurs when one species benefits at the expense of another. These are types of interactions that you probably would have seen a little bit of in your infectious disease unit. Things like ticks or other parasites that feed on mammals would be considered a type of parasitism. Finally, probably the relationship you might not be familiar with, commensalism. You might know what this relationship is, but not heard that term before. It's really just a type of relationship where one species benefits while the other is neither helped or harmed. A very common example you'll see is barnacles attaching to whales. The barnacles basically benefit from these interactions while the whales are unaffected. And ecosystems with a high number of symbiotic relationships tend to be very highly biodiverse, as these interactions often support the survival and thriving of multiple species. You'll notice that all these relationships involve both species, at least one species benefiting, which is why they're so integral to ecosystems as a whole. They need them to survive. On top of the biotic interactions I've just gone through, we also have a couple of abiotic interactions to discuss. First one being disease. Disease plays a really significant role by regulating population sizes. In areas with high population density, diseases spread more rapidly, which reduces ecosystem population sizes. And this is just basically a natural method of controlling population growth and maintaining balance within an ecosystem. It can lead to the decimation of certain species, but it's still important to the integrity of an ecosystem. Another similar one of our abiotic interactions is climate. This is a major factor. It influences all living organisms. Every species is adapted to a specific range of climate conditions, so that includes temperature, humidity, and precipitation levels. Variations in climate across different ecosystems, such as tropical rainforests, deserts, or tundras, creates really distinct environments that support very different types of species. Climate change, again, therefore poses a really significant threat to biodiversity, because it can alter the conditions that species depend on or have evolved to or adapted to survive in, which can lead to shifts in ecosystems or even the extinction of species that cannot adapt quickly enough. The final one I want to consider is the size and depth. Larger ecosystems, or those that have significant depth variations, such as oceans or mountain ranges, offer more niches or more diverse habitats for species to occupy, and therefore promote biodiversity. So these variations in size and depth can depend on the interactions between species, such as predation, competition, and symbiosis, by providing more space and resources. You might have heard different types of birds like to occupy different heights, so having this range basically provides more environments for them to do things like that. Smaller and more uniform ecosystems, such as plains and deserts, often have fewer species interactions and, as a result, lower biodiversity. That was probably a lot of information, so make sure to just take a breather and breathe in all those interactions, because they are pretty important, especially the biotic ones we saw. We're about to move on to our second topic for today, which is distribution and abundance. And a lot of the information we've just discussed will appear again, so try to keep it stored away before we move on.